I'm Sienna. I'm the kid.
I'm Sarah. I'm the mom.
This is Queer Kid Straight Mom.
Let's talk. Welcome back to Queer Kid Straight Mom. Today we're talking about a study that was released on June 11th that has not had a ton of publicity, but is really pretty interesting for the transgender community and those of us that advocate for trans people. This survey was conducted by the Advocates for Trans Equality Education Fund, formerly the National Center for Transgender Equality, in partnership with the National Black Trans Advocacy Coalition, Trans Latin Coalition, and National Queer Asian Pacific Islander Alliance. The survey was approved by the UCLA Institutional Review Board. This was a huge survey conducted by trans people of trans people, administered online in English and Spanish, and open to binary and non-binary transgender people aged 16 and older, residing in the United States, a U.S. territory, or a U.S. military base overseas. There are all sorts of interesting findings. I encourage you to check it out. I'll have a link on the webpage. What we are focusing on today, because I think this is such important information to go along with a lot of the misinformation that's out there, is that nearly all respondents, 98%, who were on gender-affirming hormone therapy or had received surgery, 97%, were more satisfied with their lives after gender-affirming hormone therapy or surgery. All respondents currently identified as trans and non-binary, but 9% had gone back to living as their sex assigned at birth, at least for a little while at some point in their lives, due predominantly to challenges related to social acceptance. Respondents primarily reported social and structural reasons for living as their sex assigned at birth. For example, the most common reason was that it was just too hard to be transgender in their community. Other common reasons included pressure from a parent and experiencing too much harassment or discrimination. Of all respondents who had medically transitioned, only 0.36% went back to living in their sex assigned at birth, at least for a while, because gender transition was not for them. So this is big information because it's telling us that it's not huge numbers of people that are detransitioning, and of people that do, the way that the people around them treat them or react to them has a bigger influence on whether they do that than them no longer wishing to transition.
Right, you can think about it a lot like, there are a lot of gay people out there, especially 20 years ago and further on back, who would, maybe marry someone of the opposite gender, not because they weren't gay any longer, but because it was really hard to be gay, because they would never be able to have their relationship recognized if they were in a gay relationship, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, that doesn't mean that being gay wasn't for them or that they weren't actually gay. Just means that society made it really hard for them to exist in the way that made them happiest.
Exactly. It's a common argument among right-wing personalities and anti-trans activists that detransition is common and that a lot of people regret having transitioned or starting to transition. 7 News Australia came out with a special covering gender-affirming care. You could check out the trailer. The link is on the website. I have to warn you, it's painfully bad. It's like supposed to be like a big expose or something. But the trailer features Chloe Cole, a detransitioner who is a regular on the anti-trans media circuit. And it really is presenting this as the brainwashing of young people and like it's a big fad that kids are getting tricked into. This narrative that people come to their senses and realize that this thing they got tricked into doing wasn't what they really wanted after all. Chloe Cole, in her efforts, has also claimed that 80% of girls who want to transition stop wanting to after puberty. Journalist Erin Reed has pointed out that these kinds of numbers, 80 to 90% detransition rates, have popped up everywhere from Montana's legislative hearings to Fox News segments. She also points out that if 80 to 90% of trans people detransitioned, that would be about 1.2 million people. And that would be a pretty visible movement.
Which, incidentally, the fact that the anti-trans people can only ever get one person to speak for them, and it's Chloe Cole, should really tell you everything you need to know. Like, she's the only person interested in doing this because there aren't that many detransitioners out there. And those who do exist are overwhelmingly like, yeah, I mean, it wasn't my thing, but that's my deal. I think other people should be able to transition.
Erin Reed makes that point. I have a link to her piece. If there were that many people detransitioning, it wouldn't be Chloe Cole's face on every single one of them. She also points out that one of the images they use for the ad is somebody that hasn't detransitioned, and they had to come back and apologize that, oh, sorry, by using this person's face, we were suggesting that that person wanted to detransition, and that might not have been the case.
Oops.
So they did have a hard time finding images to go with their piece, which, again, tells you something. So given all of this activity among, the anti-trans people about detransitioning and how much people want to do that and how many regrets there are, it's interesting to see research showing that detransition rates are much smaller than implied. And they don't come from people changing their minds so much as tiring of pressure and harassment, discrimination.
For the record, those regret rates are also considerably smaller than, like, for most other medical procedures that you'll find out there. Like, most common surgeries have a pretty significant regret rate, whether that's because things go wrong or people aren't happy with the results. And we don't tell children that they can't have other life-saving surgeries because they might regret it.
That's true. And I would imagine there are other cosmetic surgeries that people have that they think that their life is worse because of this thing they hate about themselves, their nose or whatever it is. And they think everything's going to be better if they just fix that. And then it was a lot of pain and it didn't actually fix everything. Like, I'm sure in any procedure, there is a group of people that, like, I thought this would fix everything and this wasn't actually the problem. But that is not something that is common in or specific to transitioning. I'm going to try to give some of the people that believe these narratives the benefit of the doubt, because I'm guessing that some of these people, especially young people who detransition or, halt the process or whatever, probably say out loud that they changed their minds, even if that's not exactly what's going on. I think there are probably some overbearing households where across the board, in all sorts of things, whether it's being gay or wanting to leave a religion or, any number of things, I think there is a tendency for people to say, okay, you're right, I don't know what I was thinking, just to keep the peace. And so even among the people that say out loud, I changed my mind, to their families or therapists or religious leaders or whatever, that might not be the case. That might just be the easiest way for them to make the, whatever it is, from just displeasure from their parents to, like, even abusive situations, like, the best way to make it stop is just to say, okay, you're right, I was wrong. That's not what I want after all. And so there are probably a lot of people that interact with those kids that believe them and think that they just came to their senses. I don't want to suggest that everybody that believes that that is what is happening widely is trying to be mean or cruel or to misrepresent things. I think, like with so many other contentious topics, there's a lot of saying what you think you need to say to be safe and a lot of believing what you think you need to believe for your own peace of mind. And I think those two probably come together in families with transgender kids and parents that don't really understand it a lot.
Mm-hmm. Not that we shouldn't give people the benefit of the doubt, but, a lot of people seem to be acting in really bad faith, right? It's understandable if you have one person who comes to you and says, yeah, I changed my mind, I was wrong, I'm a girl or I'm a boy or whatever, that you'd be like, maybe this is a thing that happens all the time. But the problem is that a lot of people are actually faced with evidence that directly contradicts this, like this study, or in Utah, after the law there passed that restricted gender affirming care or banned gender affirming care for trans youth. That was supposedly a moratorium that was supposed to give the legislature time to research the effects of gender affirming care and see if it was actually valuable. And 2.5 years later, this is the Salt Lake Tribune, quote, Utah healthcare experts concluded in a more than 1,000-page report, overall, there were positive mental health and psychosocial functioning outcomes as a result of gender affirming care. And They've not tried to undo the ban. They've not said, oh, we were wrong. They've just dug their heels in and said, no, they shouldn't be making these life-changing decisions. This evidence is weak. We don't believe it.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. That story is just crazy to me. No, we need to look into this and get some facts. Well, shoot, the facts don't show what we wanted them to show, so we're just going to pretend that didn't happen.
Right. It really demonstrates how bad, because a lot of times you see this with a lot of trans issues, right? Same thing with sports, where people pretend to be acting in good faith and say, no, we just need more information. This is so complicated. And then use that as an excuse for treating trans people badly or taking away their legal rights, and then have no interest in actual data.
Right. Like the show we did a few weeks ago about Nike, allegedly helping fund the study on trans athletes. And do they have an advantage? And the only attention it got in the news was, oh, they're helping to fund experiments on kids. Like, no, they're actually trying to find out if trans athletes legitimately have an advantage, which is what you should want if you really care.
They're doing the research that you claimed you wanted.
Yeah, it is kind of funny. So, yeah, I don't expect to see a lot about this study from, the anti-trans or Fox News crowds, because it's not really convenient to their arguments. But that data is out there. And like I said, it's just pretty interesting, just kind of a check-in on how trans people are doing and the difference. One thing that I found particularly powerful was the difference that having supportive families make, which, we have known with LGBTQ plus youth for a long time that having supportive family members makes a huge difference in mental health and reducing suicide rates. But yeah, that really shows up in this survey as well, that with transgender people, there's a big difference in mental health. And so, I think, again, with that sort of bad faith argument, there's a part of the population that says that they are, anti-trans, that kids shouldn't be, encouraged to express gender nonconformity, all of those things. And they use mental health as a reason, a justification. Oh, well, trans youth and adolescents have higher rates of mental health problems, so clearly it's not good for you to be trans, without recognizing the role that they, as non-supportive family members or other influential adults in trans youth's lives, play in their mental health.
Yeah, okay. So allow me to be very serious here for a minute. It is incredibly frustrating to see people who claim, oh, of course we love our kids. We just think that there are these health risks, or we're worried for our kids' mental health or their physical health. And so, we're going to use that as a reason to support the political party that restricts trans kids' rights, or, to vote in that way. When you look at the actions that Republicans have taken in the last decade, but especially the last couple of years, and even more so since Donald Trump came into office for a second term, the Supreme Court decision that just came down recently saying that Tennessee's law banning gender-affirming care for minors is constitutional, combined with the decision to basically disconnect the Trevor Project, which we've talked about before, is a really valuable LGBTQ suicide prevention line. Disconnect that from 988, which is the national suicide prevention line. I think a lot of people would look at me and say that I'm being overdramatic when I say this, but it seems like Republicans want us dead. It seems like Republicans want trans kids dead. Again, I think people see that as overdramatic or accusatory, and I'm not sure how else to feel about that when you take away literally life-saving mental and physical health care.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that, and now I'm going to say the words Nazi Germany, and people are going to think I'm being overdramatic. But I think that's how a lot of people get pulled into these things in the earlier stages and then become complacent as they progress, is that there are a lot of people that just want trans kids gone, just like there were a lot of people in Germany who just wanted Jewish people gone. They didn't want them dead specifically. They just wanted them to go away. So they were sort of a receptive audience to be provided with all of this propaganda that, like, as a gradual process, when you just hear it over and over again, And then it gradually gets more and more extreme, and you have acclimated yourself to the last thing. And then the next thing comes. It's a slippery slope from, I just want them to go away, to, I support people who want them dead.
Right, exactly. And that's exactly what is happening. And, obviously that's a hard thing to accuse the people around you of. But yeah, and it reminds me a lot of when people talk about finding a cure for autism. And you're like, but autism isn't like a disease that you can pull out and separate from a person. It's a fundamental part of how a person's brain exists. And so if you say you want a cure for autism, what you're really saying is that you don't want any autistic babies born. And what that means is you want autistic people to not exist.
Yeah. I mean, and I think there are a lot of these steps that we watch happening that a lot of people aren't making consciously. And so once they've reached this specific step and you point it out, they're like, wait, what? That's not what I wanted. I never said that.
Right? They get very defensive. They're like, I'm a good person. I would never want anybody dead. Okay, but in the abstract, the policies that you support are resulting in people dying.
Like capital punishment, which is totally different in that none of the people we're talking about have done anything wrong. But like even people that have committed crimes, like the people that say, I don't want anybody to die. I value life. Life is sacred, et cetera, et cetera. When it comes to capital punishment, will say, but they didn't follow the rules.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden there's well, except for those people, except for the people that commit horrible crimes, which, people committing horrible crimes is a horrible thing. And there are a lot of really horrible people. But you either believe that some people don't deserve to live or you don't.
Right. That's sort of a line that you have to draw, that I don't believe defenseless people should die ever. I don't believe that the state should ever deliberately take actions that are going to kill people.
Then those people would argue that you want to kill babies.
The state is, but see, that's not the state. The state is not making.
I know, that's the, what is the logical fallacy thing? The one where like you make an argument and then they're like, but you're okay with this.
Oh, whataboutism.
Whataboutism. I feel like abortion is a very popular topic.
Although come to think of it, abortion is also a straw man fallacy, because they're like, you want to kill babies. And you're like, I literally never. No one wants to kill babies.
Nobody wants to kill babies. Nobody has ever. I guess there were people in the Bible that killed babies.
God killed a lot of babies. Just saying.
Moment of silence while we ponder the Old Testament. So anyway, point being, check out this study. It's got some really interesting information. Most likely, if you cite any of it to somebody that is determined to make an argument against trans people, they will just say whatever, or you made that up, or yeah, but Fox News said.
But helpfully, if you are someone who, has felt a little bit uncomfortable with the topic of gender affirming care, who has thought, I really want to support trans people, but what is the science on this? Now you know. The science says that gender affirming healthcare is valuable, is life-saving, that detransition rates are very low. And so, maybe you're not going to change anyone's mind, but at least you can feel better about yourself.
You can feel better. And I mean, if it ever feels appropriate, just like amplify the fact that this exists, that this research is out there. I only know about this study because of, LGBTQ plus advocacy groups that I follow on social media. It's not like in the news.
Right, because shockingly enough, even though such outlets as the New York Times love to debate the value of gender-affirming healthcare, this is not front-page news for them.
No. Share it, be aware, and we can all try to be part of the solution, which is getting exhausting. We're like trying to hold up this giant boulder that's rolling down to smash us, and come help me keep this boulder from smashing us so we can be part of the solution. And there are a bunch of people that are just like, no, you're wrong. It's going to roll uphill or something.
I feel like there's some interesting potential for an Atlas retelling in here. Stay tuned for my full-length novel.
That sounds like it'll be good. I think you should follow up on that. Next week, we're going to talk about that Supreme Court case that Sienna referenced and just go into that a little bit and talk about, as Sienna also just referenced, the New York Times and, the dangerous effects of media framing, and just also provide some updated resources we just want to like get this information out there every so often, especially at times when people are feeling really helpless and like things are going in a really bad direction. We just like to make sure that we kind of reintroduce organizations that are there to help and ways to get a hold of them, and to remind people that even though it's not going to be linked to a national suicide hotline, that the Trevor Project's line does still exist and still works. So make sure people know that. Until then, try to stay positive, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye.
If you found this episode interesting, informative, amusing, please review and follow us on your podcasting platform of choice. Getting those reviews and follows really helps us show up more in the algorithm and be able to reach more people to help them. You can find us on social media, Instagram, and Threads at queerkid.straightmom, Blue Sky at qksm.bsky.social, and Facebook at queerkidstraightmom. We are no longer on Twitter.